As Gunnar, Darren and Alpha stepped through the shimmering portal, Karina remained rooted in the courtyard, the weight of everything she'd learned pressing down on her. She watched the portal close, her grip on her katana tightening as the silence enveloped her. Her true identity as Kaelithra, the last princess of Nythoria, was a revelation she was still struggling to process. Nythoria, a realm that had been sealed long ago to prevent the spread of a mysterious darkness that had begun to consume the land. Her parents had sent her to Earth, along with the 3 eggs, in a desperate bid to protect her and preserve the future of their realm. The weight of that responsibility felt unbearable. Reaching out for guidance. As the night wore on, the unanswered questions only grew louder in Karina's mind. Her powers, the shadows that responded to her, were growing stronger, but she had no clear understanding of how to control them or what they meant in the grander scheme of her destiny. Karina knew she couldn't face these uncertainties alone. There was only one person who could offer her guidance. Aeliana Vale, a trusted ally, but one who lived in Alfheim. She reached for the pack's talisman, a silver relic that allowed her to call upon Aeliana when needed. Gripping the talisman tightly, Karina whispered the incantation, and a shimmering portal appeared before her. Taking a deep breath, she stepped through, the portal's light engulfing her. Alfheim's Council. Karina emerged into the tranquil, glowing landscape of Alfheim. The trees towered above her, their leaves glowing softly under the moonlight. Ahead, Aeliana's elegant stone residence stood, its structure blending seamlessly with the natural beauty of the realm. Aeliana greeted her at the entrance, her violet eyes reflecting a calm understanding. "I knew you would come," she said, her voice soft but knowing. "The weight of your heritage is not easy to bear." Karina's heart raced as she approached, her katana hanging at her side. "I need answers," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "The eggs, my past, my powers. None of it makes sense. How am I supposed to unlock these powers when I barely understand them?" Aeliana's expression softened as she gestured for Karina to sit by a nearby pond. "You are the last of the Umbranites, Kaelithra. The realm of Nythoria was sealed to prevent the darkness from spreading beyond its borders. Your parents sent you to Earth, not only to survive but to one day reclaim what was lost. The eggs you protect are the key to unlocking the realm's future." Karina frowned. The weight of her destiny pressed down on her again, heavier than before. "But I don't know how to unlock the realm. I can't even remember most of my past." Aeliana reached out, placing a hand on Karina's shoulder. "The memory ward was placed on you to protect you. But in time, the ward will weaken, and when it does, your powers will fully awaken. The shadows you fear are not your enemies, Karina. They are a part of who you are." The path forward. As Aeliana's words settled into Karina's mind, she began to understand. The shadows, the darkness that had once felt like a curse, were tied to her heritage as an Umbranite. Her power came from the very thing she had tried to suppress. If she was to reclaim her role as the last princess of Nythoria, she would have to embrace the shadows, not fear them. Aeliana opened a portal to send Karina back to Earth, her expression calm but encouraging. "When the time is right, you will know what to do." As Karina stepped through the portal and returned to the workshop, a new sense of clarity began to take hold. She couldn't run from her past, nor could she ignore the power within her. The eggs, the realm, and the shadows were all part of her destiny. And though the path ahead remained uncertain, she knew that when the time came, she would be ready. The quiet hum of magic filled the workshop as Eli stood at her workbench, her sharp eyes fixed on shade. He leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Eli had been questioning him for nearly an hour, but his responses were elusive, his words cryptic. "You're dodging every answer," Eli muttered, her irritation barely contained. She gestured to the rune-laden scroll in front of her. These wards you bypassed weren't child's play. You either tell me how, or I'll figure it out myself. Shade remained silent, his dark eyes watching her with indifference. Eli's frustration crackled in the air, but Shade stayed aloof, his posture unmoved. The door creaked open and Karina stepped into the room. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Shade's gaze flickered toward her, acknowledging her presence, but he remained otherwise unchanged. Eli shot Karina a glance, the tension in the room almost palpable. "He's being difficult," Eli muttered, her voice laced with frustration. Karina's expression remained calm as she approached. "Shade," she said, her tone steady and commanding. "I want answers." Shade's eyes narrowed slightly, his posture stiffening. "I've been alone for a long time," he said. "No one left to answer to." Karina stepped closer, her voice taking on a firmer edge. "You swore an oath, Shade. To my family. To me." For the first time, Shade hesitated. His eyes, once distant, softened as they met hers. "I swore an oath to the Princess of Nythoria," he murmured. "But Nythoria is sealed, and that kingdom is no more." "No," Karina said, her voice stronger now. "I am still the princess, and Nythoria still exists. You failed your duty once. Don't fail it again." Eli glanced between them, sensing the shift in the room. The tension hung thick in the air, but something was changing. Shade's defiance was cracking, his resistance weakening. Shade bowed his head slightly, his voice softening. "I never thought I'd see you reclaim your birthright, princess," he sighed. "But you're right. I swore an oath, and I will honor it." Karina stepped back, her presence as the Princess of Nythoria more evident than ever. "Then help us understand. Tell us how your powers work." Shade straightened, visibly shaken but compliant. "My powers are tied to the shadows, to the realm of Nythoria. The Umbranites have always been able to move between realms, slipping through the edges of reality, blending into the darkness. That's how I bypassed your wards." Eli's brow furrowed in fascination, her earlier frustration dissipating. "So it's more like a shadow walk? But not just in this realm?" Shade nodded slightly. "Yes, it's instinctual for Umbranites, tied to the shadows that bind our realm." Karina listened closely, her heart pounding as she realized that what he described felt familiar. The shadows had always responded to her in ways she didn't fully understand, but now it made sense. "Can I learn this?" Shade turned to her, his expression softening further. "You don't need to learn it, princess. It's already part of you. The shadows will answer when you are ready." The atmosphere in the workshop felt different now. With Shade's reluctant cooperation finally secured, Karina stood a little taller, the weight of her royal lineage settling more comfortably on her shoulders. She watched as Shade moved with practiced ease, demonstrating the subtle manipulations of the shadows. It was clear he knew his powers intimately, and now it was time for her to do the same. She glanced at Eli, who was carefully taking notes, analysing everything Shade said and did with her usual meticulousness. Eli had always been the team's problem solver, a technomancer who thrived on logic and precision, but the situation at hand required more than magical theory. It required collaboration. "Shade," Karina said, her voice calm but determined. "I need you to help me unlock my powers. If I'm going to reclaim what's mine, I need to understand this connection to the shadows. I need to know how to control it." Shade studied her for a moment, the remnants of his old resistance flickering across his face before he nodded. "It won't be easy, princess. The shadows can be unpredictable, especially for someone who hasn't fully embraced them. But I'll help you." Eli set down her notes, her brow furrowing. "While you two work on that, I need to develop a way to detect when someone bypasses the pack's security, especially if they use shadow walking like Shade. The traitor is still out there, and if he's anything like Shade, he could sneak in just as easily. Karina's gaze hardened at the mention of the traitor, the man who had betrayed her and her family, who had taken her from Nythoria and sold her into darkness. She knew he was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. "You're right," Karina said to Eli. "The traitor is dangerous, and we can't let him slip through our defenses like Shade did." Eli nodded, her determination matching Karina's. "I'll start crafting detection wards and recalibrating the security system. We'll make sure no one can enter undetected again." Shade, now standing beside Karina, spoke quietly. "The traitor is cunning, but he's no longer the only one who understands the shadows. With time, Princess, you'll be able to sense him before he even enters our realm." Karina held Shade's gaze for a moment, feeling the weight of his words. She wasn't just a survivor of her past, she was a princess, the key to unlocking her realm's future. And with the help of Shade and Eli, she would make sure that her powers would not only protect her, but also the people she now called family. The air in the workshop was thick with concentration as Shade and Karina moved through the motions of her training. Shadows seemed to ripple and respond to Shade's guidance, but something unexpected happened as Karina stepped into the practice. Shade's brow furrowed slightly, watching the way she moved, not just with her body, but with the shadows themselves. "You've been using them," Shade said, his voice low and thoughtful. "You've been tapping into your powers for years without knowing it." Karina paused, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" Shade stepped closer, his eyes narrowed as he studied her. "As an assassin, the way you move, it's not just skill, it's instinct. You've been blending into the shadows, slipping in and out of sight, moving in ways only an Umbranite could." The realization hit her slowly. Karina had always attributed her abilities as an assassin to skill and training, but now that she thought about it, there had been times when she moved almost too perfectly, when her enemies didn't see her coming, not because of her stealth alone, but because she had unknowingly used her powers. "I didn't realize," she murmured, glancing at the shadows that seemed to shift around her feet. Shade gave a faint smile, a rare glint of approval in his eyes. "It's been there all along, Princess. You just need to learn how to control it." As they continued their training, Karina could feel the memory ward around her weakening. Fragments of her past began to surface, glimpses of her time in Nythoria, of the realm she was meant to save. The shadows responded more eagerly now, moving not just around her but with her. Her control was growing, and with it, so was her strength. Eli's challenge. While Karina and Shade worked, Eli was hard at work on the other side of the room, crafting a series of intricate wards and detection spells. She muttered to herself as she scribbled in her notebook, making calculations and testing different magical barriers. After a few hours, she wiped her brow, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "I've got it," Eli announced, her voice cutting through the quiet tension of Karina's training. Both Karina and Shade turned to look at her. Eli held up a small glowing crystal, the rune-engraved surface pulsing faintly with energy. "This crystal will detect any shadow walking or realm shifting near the workshop. It's designed specifically to pick up on Umbranite magic. Once it detects that kind of movement, it'll trigger a ward that will inhibit anyone from entering without permission." Shade raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. "Not bad. That should keep the trader from sneaking in like I did." Eli crossed her arms, a proud smirk forming on her lips. "I bet it will. In fact, I'm so confident, I'm going to issue a challenge." Karina tilted her head. "What kind of challenge?" Eli stepped back, positioning herself by the workbench. "I want you two to try and sneak in. Test the system. Let's see just how good my wards really are." Shade exchanged a glance with Karina, a hint of amusement flickering across his face. "You're sure about this?" "Absolutely," Eli said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Karina and Shade accepted the challenge, stepping out of the workshop and into the hall. They both blended into the shadows, their movements silent and precise. Karina moved first, her heart pounding as she focused on slipping through the dark edges of the room. The shadows wrapped around her like an old friend, but just as she neared the door, a soft pulse of energy shot through the air. The crystal flared briefly and Eli smirked from her spot by the workbench. "Gotcha, Karina." Karina cursed under her breath, the shadows slipping away as she realized she'd been detected. Still, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had managed to get that far. Shade, however, was another matter entirely. Shade's test. Shade waited patiently as Karina moved back, his eyes calculating. With years of experience mastering the shadows, he was far more skilled at slipping through the cracks of reality. With a subtle gesture, he vanished into the shadows, his presence almost imperceptible. Eli watched intently, her fingers twitching as she monitored the crystal. At first, it seemed like Shade had completely evaded detection. He was already deep inside the workshop, his figure blending perfectly with the darkness. Eli's confidence wavered slightly, her brow furrowing as she noticed nothing happening. And then, a faint pulse. The crystal flared. "Got him," Eli breathed, relief flooding her features. But even though Shade had been detected, it hadn't stopped him from entering. He was already beside Karina by the time the system caught up. "Well, well," Shade said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "It detected me, but it didn't stop me." Eli frowned, her fingers tapping against the workbench. "It's still a work in progress, but at least we know it works, mostly." Karina, watching the two of them banter, couldn't help but smile. The detection system may not be foolproof yet, but with Eli's determination it would be soon enough. And with Shade's help, she was learning to harness the powers she never realized she had. Still, there was always the lingering thought of the trader. If he were able to use powers similar to Shade's, he would remain a threat. But with every step they took, the pack was growing stronger, and Karina was no longer just a skilled fighter. She was unlocking the full potential of her Umbranite blood. The warm glow of the overhead lights in the dining facility bathed the room in a comfortable ambience. Binnaker, with her Italian heritage on full display, had outdone herself again. The rich smell of freshly made pasta, garlic bread, and savoury sauces filled the air as Eli, Karina, Shade, and Ashley gathered around the large oak table, plates filled with delicious food. Eli twirled her fork through a mound of spaghetti, her eyes darting between the others, amusement twinkling in her gaze. "You know, Binnaker, you should be careful. We're going to start expecting this kind of feast every night." Binnaker laughed from the kitchen, where she was still working on dessert. "Don't worry, Eli. There's plenty more where that came from." Ashley, sitting beside Eli, smiled as she took a bite of the creamy fettuccine. "I could get used to this," she said, her eyes twinkling. "I don't think I've had a meal this good since, well, ever." Karina, usually quiet during meals, seemed lost in thought as she picked at her plate. The day's training with Shade weighed on her mind. She was learning more about herself, more about the shadows and her connection to them. But it was also stirring things deep inside her, things she wasn't sure she was ready to confront. Yet the warmth and laughter around the table made her feel at ease, if only for a little while. Shade, ever the silent observer, sat across from her, his plate only half eaten. His dark eyes flickered toward her every so often, but he remained withdrawn, as if the casual atmosphere was something foreign to him. "You barely touched your food," Eli said to Shade, leaning back in her chair and gesturing at his plate. "Don't tell me the shadows are enough to keep you full." Shade quirked an eyebrow, a hint of a smirk tugging at his lips. "I don't need much. Old habits die hard, I suppose." Karina looked up from her plate. "You should eat," she said quietly, surprising herself. She had spent so many years on her own, living on survival instincts. Seeing Shade like this reminded her of those darker days. He met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. With a small nod, Shade picked up his fork and took another bite, though his expression remained distant. A walk in the shadows. After dinner, the group parted ways. Karina felt restless, her mind still churning over the day's events. As she stepped outside into the cool evening air, she heard footsteps behind her. It was Shade. "Care for a walk?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. She nodded, and together they walked in silence for a while, the shadows of the night casting long shapes over the grounds. The stars twinkled faintly above, and the faint hum of the night surrounded them. Shade finally broke the silence. "You've been doing well with your training. Better than I expected." Karina glanced at him, her brow furrowing. "It's strange," she admitted. "It feels like I've known how to do this all along, like it was always there, waiting." "That's because it was," Shade said, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon. "Your powers were always part of you, even before you understood them." Karina's thoughts turned to the fragments of memories she had begun to recover. The shadows. They're not just a tool, are they? They're connected to who I am. Shade nodded. "Yes. You're not just anyone, Karina. You're the Princess of Nythoria, and that comes with more than just a title." She stopped walking, her eyes narrowing. "You've always known, haven't you, that I wasn't just an assassin?" Shade paused, turning to face her fully. His expression was unreadable, but there was a heaviness in his eyes, a weight that had been there for a long time. "There's something I've kept from you," he admitted, his voice low. "I wasn't just anyone either before all of this. I was the captain of the house guard for your parents. My real name isn't Shade, it's Zariel." Karina blinked, the revelation hitting her harder than she expected. "Zariel," she whispered, testing the name on her tongue. Shade, Zariel, looked away for a moment before continuing. "When the trader took you, he betrayed us all. He knocked me unconscious, and by the time I came to, you were gone. I failed you and your family, and I've been living in the shadows ever since." Karina took a step closer to him, her voice soft. "Why didn't you tell me?" Zariel's eyes met hers, filled with remorse. "I didn't think you'd ever step into your role. I didn't think you'd want to be that person. But now, seeing you embrace your powers, I realize I was wrong." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of Zariel's confession settling between them. "You didn't fail me," Karina said finally, her voice steady. "We were both taken from what we knew. But now, we have a chance to set things right." Zariel nodded, his expression softening as he regarded her with newfound respect. "You've grown stronger than I ever could have imagined, Princess." Karina's heart swelled, but she kept her face calm, her gaze steady. "We'll need that strength to face what's coming." They resumed walking, the bond between them stronger than ever, as the shadows followed in their wake. The morning sun had barely risen when Karina and Zariel returned to the workshop, ready for their second round of testing with Eli. After last night's revelations, Karina felt more connected to her powers, more confident in who she was becoming. But there was still so much to learn, both about herself and about the people around her. Eli was already waiting, her arms crossed as she leaned against her workbench. The crystal detection system from their last attempt sat on the table, but this time it had been upgraded. Wires ran from it to an array of runes engraved into the walls, and a faint hum of magic filled the air, promising something far more formidable than before. "You're not getting through this time," Eli said confidently, glancing between Karina and Zariel. "This system is much stronger now. It won't just detect you, it'll stop you." Karina raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "Stop me?" Eli nodded. "If you try to shadow walk past the wards, it'll knock you out of the shadows and prevent you from blending in. You'll be forced out into the open." Zariel, standing beside Karina, watched Eli with a faint smile. "And me?" Eli gave him a knowing look. "You'll have a harder time too. I won't make it easy." Karina smirked, feeling a rush of determination. Let's see what you've got. Testing the shadows. Karina took a deep breath as she stepped outside the workshop, ready to attempt shadow walking through Eli's wards. The shadows felt familiar now, more like an extension of herself than ever before. She slipped into them easily, blending with the darkness as she moved toward the entrance. But just as she neared the door, a sharp pulse of energy erupted from the wards. Karina felt a force slam into her, knocking her out of the shadows. She stumbled forward, exposed and unable to blend back in. Eli's voice echoed from inside. "Told you." Karina shook her head, regaining her balance. The wards had worked exactly as Eli said they would, and she could feel the magic suppressing her ability to merge with the shadows. She tried again, but the moment she moved, the system responded, pushing her back into the light. From the doorway, Eli stood watching, a satisfied smirk on her face. "It's not going to let you in this time. You're grounded." Karina let out a frustrated breath, but couldn't help admiring Eli's work. The system was effective. Too effective. "Tratase," Shade's test. Now it was Zariel's turn. He glanced at Karina before slipping into the shadows himself, his movements fluid and seamless. As he approached the wards, he could feel their power. The system was strong, stronger than he expected. But Zariel had years of experience, and while the detection wards flared brightly, pushing back against him, he managed to move deeper inside. Eli watched closely, her brow furrowing as she saw him make it further than Karina had. The system struggled to keep up with him, and though it detected him, it didn't prevent him from slipping in. He wasn't invisible. He could feel the wards tugging at the edges of his presence, but he was still able to bypass them, albeit with difficulty. Finally, Zariel stepped through the doorway, the shadows peeling away as he reappeared on the other side. He looked at Eli with a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Impressive," he said, "but it's not enough to stop me. Not yet." Eli huffed in frustration but nodded. "You were closer than last time, but I'll make it work. Next time, you won't get through." A walk in the past. Later that evening, after a long day of training and testing, Karina found herself walking the grounds again. Zariel walked beside her, silent for the first few minutes as they passed the familiar landmarks of the pack's home. Karina's thoughts drifted back to their training session and the memories that had surfaced during her practice. The shadows had brought back fragments of her life before, glimpses of her family, of Nythoria before it was sealed away. She felt closer to her past, but it was still fragmented, elusive. "I still don't know everything," Karina said quietly, breaking the silence. "There's so much I don't remember, so much I need to know." Zariel glanced at her, his expression softening. "The memories will come, but they won't come all at once." Karina frowned, her thoughts heavy. "It's frustrating. I feel like I'm on the edge of something, but it's just out of reach." Zariel nodded, his gaze drifting toward the sky. "I know the feeling, but you're stronger than you think, Karina. You've survived more than most could handle. The rest will come when it's time." She turned to him, searching his face. "Do you really believe that?" He met her gaze, his eyes filled with quiet resolve. "Yes. And when the time comes, I'll be here to help you. I swore an oath to you, and I'll honor that." For the first time in a long while, Karina felt a flicker of hope. She still had a long way to go, but she wasn't alone. With Zariel at her side and Eli working tirelessly on the security measures, they were making progress, slowly but surely. And with the traders still out there, they needed every advantage they could get. The moon hung low on the horizon, its silver light just beginning to peek through the trees surrounding the pack's compound. Zariel had spent the day reflecting on the words he would say tonight, but before he made any grand gestures, there was something else he needed to do, something more personal. Rather than calling everyone to the courtyard right away, he wanted to speak with the pack members individually as a way of understanding their bond with Karina and reinforcing his own connection with them. After all, these were the people she now considered family. Zariel began with Ashley, who was outside working on her combat drills, her movements sharp and controlled. She noticed his approach but didn't pause in her training. "You've been training hard," Zariel said, leaning against a nearby tree. Ashley grunted in response, wiping the sweat from her brow. "Have to keep sharp. This pack is my family, and there's always something coming." Zariel nodded, watching her. "You care about them. About her." Ashley gave him a sidelong glance. "Karina's one of us now. We protect our own." There was a pause before Zariel spoke again, more gently. "Tonight, I'll be asking for something important from all of you. An oath. I need to know if you'll stand with her, even when things get hard." Ashley stopped her drills and turned to face him fully. "I'm Pack. That means I stand with her, no matter what." Her voice was resolute, her loyalty clear. "But she's strong. Don't underestimate her." Zariel smiled faintly. "I never have." Next, Zariel found Eli in her workshop, surrounded by blueprints and arcane instruments. She barely looked up from her work when he entered, her focus entirely on a gadget she was fine-tuning. "I assume this isn't just a social visit," Eli remarked, tightening a bolt on the device before turning to face him. Zariel approached her workbench, taking in the various bits of tech strewn across it. "I wanted to talk to you about Karina, about what's happening tonight." Eli leaned back against the table, crossing her arms. "She's come a long way. But if this is about protection, you know I'll do whatever it takes to keep her safe." Her voice was matter-of-fact, but there was an underlying warmth that only those close to her knew. Zariel nodded. "It's more than that. Karina is stepping into a role she never expected. I want her to know she's not alone." Eli smirked. "She's not. And she'll never be." She glanced at him with a raised eyebrow. "You really care about her, don't you?" Zariel met her gaze, his expression softening. "She's more than a princess to me. She's part of something bigger now, and I'll do whatever it takes to see her succeed." Eli's smirk grew into a full smile. "Good, then we're on the same page." Ta! Finally, Zariel found Desera at the training field, watching over the facility recruits as they sparred. Her keen eyes missed nothing, and her stance was that of someone who was always ready for action. When she saw Zariel approach, she waved the recruits off for a break and walked over to meet him. "You've got something on your mind," she observed. "I do," Zariel admitted, glancing at the trainees. "Tonight I'll be renewing my oath to Karina. I wanted to know where you stand." Desera tilted her head, considering him carefully. "Karina's had a hard life, but she's here now and she's fighting. I respect that." Zariel nodded. "Will you be there tonight? Will you stand with her?" Desera's eyes hardened with determination. "I've got her back. Always." The gathering. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the compound, the members of the pack began gathering in the courtyard. The full moon was rising, bathing the area in a cool, silvery light. The pack stood in a loose circle, the air filled with quiet anticipation. Zariel, now standing with Karina by his side, looked out at the pack he had spoken with earlier. Ashley, Eli, and Desera stood, their eyes trained on him. They were ready. "I've asked you all here tonight," Zariel began, his voice steady but full of emotion, "because I need you to witness what is about to happen. Karina, or rather Kaelithra, is not just one of us. She is the last princess of Nythoria. And tonight, I will renew the oath I made to her and her family." He turned to Karina, his gaze softening. "And I ask that all of you, her family, her pack, stand with her as well." The full moon hung heavy in the sky, casting a pale light over the courtyard as the pack stood in quiet anticipation. The cool night air was thick with tension as Zariel knelt before Kaelithra, his dark eyes reflecting the moonlight. The shadows around them shifted and flickered as if they were alive, waiting for the moment to unfold. Kaelithra of Nythoria. Zariel's voice was low but strong, his words carrying the weight of a lifetime of loyalty. I, Zariel, once the captain of your family's house guard, kneel before you once more. I swear, on my life and on the shadows that have guided me, to protect you and your lineage. No force will ever break my oath again. I am yours, to command. His head remained bowed as he spoke, his devotion clear in every syllable. The pack stood in silence, watching with solemn expressions. Eli, Ashley, and Desera exchanged glances, sensing the gravity of the moment. Kaelithra, now fully stepping into her role as the Princess of Nythoria, took a deep breath. The title felt foreign but also familiar, as though she had worn it in another life. She looked down at Zariel, her heart pounding. For the first time, she fully embraced her birthright. I accept your oath, Zariel, she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She raised her hand, touching it lightly to his forehead. And I bless you in the name of our ancestors and the shadows that have always protected us. The moment her hand touched him, something inside her shifted. A wave of power surged through her body, stronger than anything she had ever felt before. The memory ward, which had kept her true identity hidden for so long, shattered. Suddenly, the floodgates opened. Memories, both beautiful and terrible, rushed into her mind all at once. Her childhood in Nythoria, her parents, the betrayal by the trader, and the overwhelming darkness that consumed her realm. It all came crashing down on her like a tidal wave, threatening to drown her in its force. Kaelithra's knees buckled as the surge of power overwhelmed her. The ground seemed to tilt beneath her feet, and her vision blurred. The shadows around her pulsed and flickered violently, growing denser and darker with each passing second. Kaelithra! Zariel's voice was filled with alarm as he reached out to steady her, but the darkness around them had taken on a life of its own. Eli's device, which had been designed to monitor and detect any supernatural disturbances, began to spark and whine. The sudden overload of energy sent it into a frenzy, and with a sharp crack, the entire device exploded, sending shards of crystal scattering across the courtyard. Get back! Eli shouted, trying to contain the magical backlash, but it was too late. The shadows surged forward, swallowing Kaelithra whole. One moment she was there, and the next she was gone, disappearing into the shadows without a trace. The pack stood frozen in shock, the courtyard eerily silent after the chaotic explosion. Ashley and Desera rushed forward, their faces pale with fear. Eli, her eyes wide with disbelief, stared at the smouldering remains of her device. She's gone, Zariel whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. He knelt where she had stood, his eyes searching the darkness for any sign of her. But there was nothing, just the lingering shadows that had taken her. What just happened? Ashley asked, her voice shaky. I don't know, Eli muttered, her gaze darting around the courtyard. But whatever it wasn't supposed to happen like this. Zariel stood slowly, his fists clenched at his sides. The tension in the air was palpable as the pack members exchanged uneasy glances. What do we do now? Desera asked quietly, her voice barely audible. We find her, Zariel said, his voice hardening with determination. No matter what it takes, we get her back. Zariel stood frozen for only a moment after Kaelithra's disappearance, the weight of his failure washing over him. But there was no time to dwell. He would not lose his princess again. Not to the shadows, not to anyone. His fists tightened as he rose to his full height, his determination blazing in his eyes. We need to act fast, Zariel said, his voice cold with resolve. The pack nodded in agreement, already moving to spring into action. Ashley reached for her talisman, the small stone warm under her touch, as she called upon Eliana Vale. The air shimmered for a moment before a glowing portal formed. Eliana stepped through, her face grave as she surveyed the scene. "What's happened?" Eliana asked, sensing the tension immediately. "She's gone," Eli said quietly, walking over to Eliana with a piece of her damage detection device. "And whatever pulled her into the shadows, it wasn't something I've ever seen before." Eliana's eyes darkened. She reached out her hand, casting a spell to feel the lingering magic in the air. The energy around the courtyard was heavy, almost suffocating, and there was a pulse of darkness she had felt only once before. "This darkness, it's ancient," Eliana murmured, her eyes narrowing as she focused. "It's from Nythoria, from the sealed realm." Everyone exchanged worried glances, realizing the implications. If something from Nythoria had come through, then the forces that had once consumed Karina's home were not entirely gone. Eli's discovery. As the others continued to search for clues, Eli returned to her workshop, her mind racing. Something about the shadows and the surge of power felt connected to the eggs they had recovered. When she entered her lab, her eyes immediately locked onto one of the 3 eggs. It was glowing, a bright, pulsating light that hadn't been there before. She approached slowly, her heart pounding in her chest as she watched the light grow brighter with every step. "What's happening?" Eli whispered to herself, reaching out to touch the egg. The moment her fingers made contact with the smooth surface, the glow intensified, filling the room with a soft, radiant light. For a brief second, she thought she saw something move inside. Her breath hitched. Could this be related to Kaelithra's disappearance? Had the egg somehow responded to the surge of power from the princess? Kaelithra opened her eyes and found herself standing in a cold, familiar room. The air was thick with an oppressive darkness, the kind that clawed at her soul. The surroundings triggered a deep sense of dread, but also an eerie familiarity. She had been here before, long ago when she had been controlled by forces that twisted her into something she barely recognized. In the center of the room, she saw her younger self. A girl no older than 12, thin with haunted eyes, wearing a tattered dress that was once regal. Her skin was pale and her hands trembled slightly as she sat huddled in a corner, a shadow of the warrior Kaelithra had become. The younger version looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and defiance, the same emotions Kaelithra remembered feeling back then. They stared at each other for a long, tense moment. Neither spoke at first, the silence heavy between them. Young Kaelithra stood slowly, her expression guarded, as if not trusting this older, stronger version of herself. "You've come back," the young Kaelithra said, her voice soft but laced with bitterness. "Why?" Kaelithra hesitated, not entirely sure how to answer. "I didn't choose to come back here. I was pulled." She stepped closer, her heart aching for the lost girl before her. We went through so much." "You left me," the younger version hissed, her eyes narrowing. "You became something else. You grew stronger, and you forgot. You forgot the pain." "I didn't forget." Kaelithra shook her head, her voice filled with emotion. "I fought to survive. We fought. That's why I'm here now, because of you." The younger Kaelithra's eyes flickered with doubt. "You grew up. You escaped. But look at me. I'm still here. Stuck in the darkness, waiting, always waiting." Kaelithra took a deep breath, the weight of her past pressing down on her. "I didn't escape. I've been fighting this darkness ever since. But I'm here now. I've come back to face it. We can face it together." For a long moment, the younger version said nothing, her eyes searching Kaelithra's face as though weighing her words. Then slowly she softened, the guarded expression fading. "Do you think we can?" the young Kaelithra whispered, her voice filled with vulnerability. Kaelithra knelt down, reaching out her hand to her younger self. "Yes," Together we can. The younger Kaelithra hesitated, but finally reached out, their hands meeting in a fragile connection. The room seemed to tremble, the shadows shifting as the two versions of Kaelithra connected. For the first time, they faced their shared past as one. Meanwhile, back in the present, Eli hurried into the workshop where Aeliana Vale and Zariel were discussing possible ways to track Kaelithra's disappearance. "It's the egg," Eli said, breathless, holding up the glowing object in her hands. "It's reacting. Something's happening, and it's connected to Kaelithra." Zariel's eyes narrowed as he looked at the glowing egg. "We need to figure out what this means. Now." As the younger version of Kaelithra dissolved into her older self, the oppressive shadows that had surrounded her began to fade. The room blurred, and soon she felt herself being pulled away from the memory, her surroundings shifting once again. When her vision cleared, she found herself back in Nythoria, standing in a grand, familiar hall. Her home, the one she had been taken from so long ago. This time, she was an observer, unseen by the figures rushing through the hall. Her parents, regal and imposing, were hurriedly preparing for something. She could see the tension in their faces, the worry in their movements. Her heart clenched as she watched her mother, a woman with flowing dark hair and sharp, kind eyes, hurriedly pack what looked like magical scrolls and charms into a small chest. Her father, tall and strong, wore his armor, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, as if ready for battle at any moment. Kaelithra wanted to reach out to them, to scream that she was here, but no sound left her lips. Instead, she was forced to watch as the scene played out before her. "We don't have much time," her father said, his voice strained. "The darkness is spreading faster than we anticipated." "I know," her mother replied, her voice cracking slightly, though she tried to remain composed. "But we must protect her. She's our only hope. She's the key." Kaelithra's breath hitched. She had known she was sent to Earth to escape the darkness, but hearing the urgency and the love in her parents' voices made it all feel painfully real. Then she saw herself. A child, no more than 4 years old, with wide, innocent eyes, sitting quietly in the corner. Her tiny hands clutched a small doll, unaware of the gravity of the moment. Her mother knelt before her, smoothing the child's hair back gently. "Kaelithra, my sweet, you're going on a journey, but I promise it's for your safety. You must be brave." The child Kaelithra nodded, her eyes trusting but confused. Her mother's hand trembled as she kissed her daughter's forehead. Her father, ever the warrior, stood a few steps away, but even he could not hide the pain in his eyes. "You are the last hope for Nythoria, Kaelithra. When the time comes, you will bring our realm back from the darkness. But for now, you must go." The sadness in his voice sent a chill through the older Kaelithra, and her heart ached for the little girl who had no idea what awaited her. Suddenly, a younger Zariel entered the hall, looking much like the man she had come to know, but his features were softer, less hardened by time. He wore his armor proudly, the crest of her family emblazoned on his chest. "Zariel," her father said firmly, "you will accompany her. You are to protect her with your life. No one, not even the forces of darkness, can know her true identity. Keep her safe, no matter what." Zariel's face was resolute, his loyalty to her family unquestionable. He knelt before the young princess, a silent vow in his eyes. "I will protect her, my lord. She will be safe with me." Kaelithra watched as her younger self was handed over to Zariel, her small hand disappearing into his as they prepared to leave. Her mother's tears silently fell as they exchanged one final look of love and longing with their daughter. "Be strong, my love," her mother whispered. "We will meet again." With that, Zariel lifted the small child into his arms and turned toward the portal that would take them to Earth. Kaelithra's parents stood silently, watching their daughter disappear into the unknown, their hearts breaking but knowing they had no other choice. Kaelithra's heart felt as though it would shatter in her chest. The rush of emotions, love, fear, loss, overwhelmed her as she stood there, helpless to intervene. Her parents had believed in her destiny, and had sacrificed everything to ensure her safety. And Zariel, he had sworn to protect her, and even now he was keeping that promise. Suddenly the scene faded, and she felt herself pulled back into the present. Her body felt heavy, and the flood of memories and emotions threatened to drown her. As her vision blurred once more, she could feel herself slipping into unconsciousness. Back in the present, the egg in Eli's lab pulsed brightly, glowing with an intensity that could not be ignored. Eliana Vale reached out her hand, her eyes widening as she sensed the magic within it. "This is not just an egg," Eliana whispered, her voice full of awe. "It's connected to Kaelithra's powers, her very essence." Zariel's face was tense as he looked at Eliana. "What does it mean?" "It means," Eliana said, her eyes still fixed on the glowing egg, "that the princess is waking up to her true power. And this is only the beginning." Kaelithra's vision blurred once more as she slipped further into the past, deeper into Nythoria's history. When her surroundings cleared, she stood in a darkened chamber, the walls adorned with ancient symbols of power. Before her, a circle of elders sat around a glowing cell of pulsating darkness. It was alive, contained but threatening, its very presence oppressive. The elders were in deep discussion, their faces stern and grave. As she moved closer, Kaelithra realized this wasn't just any gathering. This was the moment her world's fate was decided. "This force could change the course of our realm," one elder said, his voice heavy with doubt. "It's dangerous. We don't know if we can control it." "Control it?" another snapped, an air of arrogance in his tone. "We should destroy it before it destroys us. This darkness is too powerful, too unpredictable." Kaelithra's eyes scanned the faces of the elders, but then one figure caught her attention, a younger version of the trader, standing off to the side. He was watching the discussion intently, but his eyes gleamed with ambition. It was clear that his mind was already made up. "We need this power," the trader said smoothly, stepping forward. His voice was calm but persuasive. "If we release it, we could harness it, use it to strengthen our realm beyond all others. Think about what it could bring us: domination, control over the realms that have ignored our greatness." The other elders looked at him, some nodding in agreement, others more wary. But the seed of temptation had already been planted. Kaelithra's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the moment unfold. This was it. This was how it began. The darkness that destroyed her world, the very force that had overtaken Nythoria, had once been a choice made in greed and ambition, and the trader had been behind it all. Her hands clenched into fists as she listened to the voices that argued for and against releasing the darkness. But in the end, the decision was made. "We release it," the head elder said reluctantly, sealing the fate of Nythoria. Back on Earth, the egg in Eli's workshop pulsed violently, growing larger with each passing second. The light it emitted filled the room, blinding in its intensity. Eli, panic rising in her chest, backed away from the egg. "This isn't good," Eli muttered, her voice trembling with fear. "We need to move it. Now." She reached for the egg, but the moment her hands touched it, a searing pain shot through her fingers, forcing her to recoil. I can't touch it." "Why is it growing?" Ashley asked, her eyes wide as she noticed the intensity of the glow. "And look," she pointed outside the window, her voice rising. "The stones in the courtyard. They're glowing too." The courtyard stones, ancient and imbued with mystical power, now glowed with the same eerie light as the egg. A faint hum filled the air, vibrating through the very ground they stood on. Something was coming, something they weren't prepared for. As Kaelithra's vision faded, she saw the Elder's fateful decision take form. The cell of darkness they had recklessly released began to pulse, its energy intensifying until, with a terrible roar, it engulfed the room. The Elders cried out, their forms swallowed whole by the overwhelming shadow. But Kaelithra saw one figure, the trader still young, fleeing the scene, barely escaping the onslaught. His face was pale, but his eyes were filled with cold calculation. The darkness swirled like a living entity, devouring everything in its path. Kaelithra's heart raced as she stood frozen, watching the forces that would later claim her world. But the scene shifted once again, catapulting her forward through time. Earth, years later. Kaelithra now stood in a clearing, where the trader and a young Azariel carried her, still a child, through a portal. The weight of their mission bore down on both of them, though it was clear the trader had other plans. She followed the scene as it unfolded. They stepped into a new world, Earth, and for a moment, everything seemed peaceful. But that illusion shattered as the trader pulled a small device from his cloak. Without hesitation, he pressed the button, and a pulse of energy rendered Zariel unconscious. "No!" Kaelithra gasped, but of course no sound left her lips. The trader, cold and deliberate, bent down to Zariel's unconscious form, then turned his gaze to the child Kaelithra. He whispered something inaudible before opening another portal. Kaelithra followed, compelled to see where he took her. As the portal rippled open, they stepped into a twisted, shadow-filled realm, a place Kaelithra recognized all too well. There, standing tall with dark, demonic power radiating from him, was Ultranacious Eternus, the Demon King. The very one that Gunnar had slain, the same one whose realm Gunnar was now in. The realization hit Kaelithra like a blow, a cold shiver running down her spine. This was who had controlled her, who had twisted her life from the very beginning. She watched in horror as the trader handed her over to the Demon King, the child version of her staring blankly as dark magic surrounded her. The pieces fell into place. This was how her fate had been sealed. Back at the workshop, chaos reigned. The egg, now glowing with an otherworldly light, hovered in mid-air. Eli and Eliana Vale worked frantically, their combined magical and technological efforts doing little to stop the egg's rapid growth. "I can't contain it!" Eli yelled over the rising hum of energy. Her equipment sparked, overloaded by the sheer power emanating from the egg. Eliana waved her hand, casting complex spells that fizzled out against the egg's radiant aura. "This is beyond us," she muttered, her voice laced with frustration. "It's connected to Kaelithra, and I fear it's reacting to her." Suddenly, Ashley's voice cut through the chaos. "The courtyard! Look!" They all turned to see the stones in the courtyard, glowing in sync with the egg. A pulse of energy seemed to pass between them, connecting the courtyard's ancient power to the egg's mysterious energy. The egg, still levitating, drifted out of the workshop, as though drawn to the courtyard's center. It grew larger, brighter, pulsating with an unknown force. "What's happening?" Eli whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Eliana's eyes darkened. "The realm's power is waking, and if we don't stop it, we may lose control over everything." As Kaelithra, no, Karina, felt the full weight of her memories crashing into her, it was as if a dam had broken inside her. She remembered Ultranacious, the Demon King, and how he had tried to bend her will, to mold her into his weapon. She remembered the horror of the missions she had been forced into, the cold-blooded assassinations, the lives she had taken under his command. And she remembered the day she had faced Gunnar, how he had bested her, and in that moment of defeat had offered her a chance at redemption. But above all, she remembered the trader's betrayal, how he had handed her over, condemned her to a life of darkness, all for his own twisted ambitions. The pressure inside her chest built to unbearable levels. Her hands clenched as waves of power surged through her body, twisting and burning in ways she had never felt before. She was going to explode. It felt like the very darkness that had once controlled her was now fighting to break free, but this time, she was the one in control. Back on Earth, the courtyard was a storm of energy. The stones beneath their feet pulsed and hummed louder and louder, the vibrations so intense that cracks began to form along the walls of the workshop. Eli, Zariel, and the rest of the team scrambled, trying to make sense of what was happening. "The stones! They're going to tear everything apart!" Ashley shouted, her voice barely audible over the deafening hum. The egg in the courtyard was no longer just glowing, it was blinding, a burning orb of light that consumed all shadows in its vicinity. It shimmered like the sun, and then, with a terrifying lurch, it began to draw in the darkness around it. The shadows in the courtyard, in the trees, even underfoot, were all sucked into the light. There were no shadows left anywhere, only pure, overwhelming light. "Get everyone out!" Zariel yelled, trying to shield his eyes. "It's going to blow!" But it was too late. With a deafening roar, the egg exploded, sending a shockwave of blinding light across the courtyard. The ground shook violently and the entire compound seemed ready to collapse. At the last moment, the starlight gem, embedded into the very heart of the workshop, absorbed the brunt of the explosion, the mystical energy wrapping around the stones and preventing their total destruction. The blinding light receded, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. As the dust began to settle, Eli, Zariel, and the others slowly lowered their arms. The courtyard was still intact, though debris littered the area. In the center, standing tall, was Karina. Her form had changed. Dark tendrils of shadow swirled around her, writhing and twisting like living entities, but they did not control her. They obeyed her. Her eyes glowed with a fierce, otherworldly power, and the air around her buzzed with the weight of her presence. "I am Queen of Nythoria," Karina declared, her voice cold and unyielding. Her gaze swept over the gathered team, and there was no mistaking the power she held now. "The traitor will pay for what he did to my world." Zariel dropped to his knee in reverence, his voice shaking as he spoke. "My queen." Eli exchanged a look with Ashley, tension crackling in the air. No one moved. The sheer intensity of Karina's power was palpable. The shadows danced at her feet, responding to her every thought, her every emotion. She was no longer the assassin who had fought beside them. She was something far greater, something unstoppable. The dark tendrils around her tightened, coiling like serpents, waiting for her command. Her body hummed with energy, her memories and powers fully returned, her rage focused on one thing: vengeance. "The traitor betrayed us all," Karina continued, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "And now, he will die for it." She turned, her tendrils swirling in a violent dance, her presence undeniable. Power radiated from her like the very darkness she had once been controlled by. Only now, she was the master of it. The tendrils lashed out at the air as if testing their strength, as if eager to destroy.
All right, you've made it this far. That means either you like what you're seeing, or you're lost. Either way, no harm in sticking around, right? Go on, hit that subscribe button, join the team, and while you're at it, hit like, because, let's be honest, you're already invested. And the bell? That's for you if you don't want to miss any of the action. You wouldn't want me to come find you. See you soon, and remember, once you're in, you're family.